Hey, what is up, mortals? It is JSatwekar here, and before we get into today's video, there's something I'd like to say. I'd like to let you all know that we have a merch store. Some of the items in it are only available for a limited amount of time, so if you're interested, go into the description and check it out. Each purchase helps us make more content. Secondly, if this video hits 500 likes by the end of the week, we will continue this What If. Thirdly, if you didn't know, only 41.3% of you guys are subscribed to us. So please hit that subscribe button and click the bell icon. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the story. The bodies of All Might and All for One were recovered by the number 2 hero, Endeavor. The sudden and tragic death of the symbol of peace stunned the world. It was so shocking, and sudden rumor mills were unable to develop fake stories about his death. Autopsies were immediately performed on the bodies. Mere hours after All Might's passing, his former sidekick, Sir Night-Eye, revealed the man's final request. The symbol of peace had requested that his nemesis, All for One, receive a proper funeral. Within hours, Japan felt the effects of the now-deceased hero's request. Everything in the country came to a screeching halt. Crime dropped down to zero as everyone processed the request. Night-Eye never gave the Japanese government a chance to debate the issue. Once the coroner finished conducting the autopsies, Sir Night-Eye claimed both bodies. All Might's former sidekick had no intention of letting his mentor's final request be ignored. With his usual calculated precision, he started to prepare the bodies for the funerals. He ordered 2 of his sidekicks to track down the boy responsible for the USJ incident. Class 1A took the death of their teacher poorly. Shinso, the newest member of Class 1A, watched as his classmates withdrew from the world. When the purple-haired boy tried to talk to other members of Class 1A, most simply ignored him. Classmates who did acknowledge his existence blew him off by saying that he didn't understand what they were going through. As the week passed, the sleep-deprived student grew to hate the ever-growing chasm between him and his fellow 1A students. Most of his anger was directed at the Safety Commission for the mess he was in. Shinso also directed some of his anger at his classmates for shutting him out. A small part of himself loathed his inability to help his classmates with their grief. Combined with the grief he was feeling from the death of a hero he admired, the purple-haired boy found it difficult to express his emotions. 3 days before the funeral was set to take place, their teacher called them into Class 1A. Lethargic and depressed mumbles replaced the usual energetic and happy conversations. As Shinso entered the room, the class fell silent. That was the last straw. The purple-haired boy's emotions came pouring out from him.
You're right. I can't understand what you're going through. I didn't know All Might the way you guys did. But this isn't working. At some point, you have to stop internalizing the pain,
Shinso shouted as he started his tirade.
Yes, I know I haven't had a chance to prove myself. However, you guys are not talking about the pain because each of you is experiencing similar pain. So there's no need to express it. I don't know the relationship the class had with All Might, so try and explain it to me. I saw each one of you out there during that last fight All Might had, and you proved you were real heroes. So give me the chance to prove that I have what it takes to be a real hero!
Aizawa pretended to be asleep in his yellow sleeping bag. The black-haired teacher was relieved to see that the newest student was finally finding his footing in the class. 1A was silent after their newest classmate lashed out at them for ignoring him. A green-haired boy with heavy bags under his eyes was the first one to break the silence. Sorry, Shinso. I haven't been sleeping well. I'm lucky if I can sleep for 30 minutes without waking up from my nightmares, Izuku tiredly said. He let out a yawn before saying, You're right. As a class, we haven't had to talk about how All Might's passing affected us. You're the only one who never got the chance to have a relationship with All Might. Tears started to stream down Izuku's face as he mentioned All Might. The once bright emerald eyes the boy had were now full of sadness and despair. His school uniform was wrinkled. Izuku looked like he hadn't smiled in weeks. His blonde-haired friend reached over and gently rubbed the green-haired boy's back. The atomic blonde looked at his purple-haired classmate. His eyes were full of anguish and a surprising amount of self-loathing. Borealis, just let it out. Mind control. If you're serious about being a member of 1A, then you should try to find out why the nerd can't sleep, Katsuki growled in frustration. I know why I can't help my best friend. It's like I'm just making the damned issue worse or something. Shinso just stared in shock. The exhausted boy had never heard his blonde classmate ask for help. The purple-haired boy was surprised by how tender his explosive classmate was behaving. He had expected to get yelled at because he was the new kid. What the newest member of 1A wasn't expecting was Katsuki admitting he couldn't do something. Apparently, the rest of the class felt the same way. Even the teacher briefly looked at his blonde-haired student. Katsuki's gruff attitude was replaced by one of self-loathing and self-deprecation. I wasn't expecting that. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that, the purple-haired boy said in shock. I think you're unable to help because of how close you are. He doesn't need to explain how he feels to you. You already know it. It's why you can't help. Both of you need a chance to express what you're feeling, but you can't because both of you already know how the other person is feeling. Shinso walked over to his green-haired classmate and gave him a gentle pat on the back. The temptation to use his quirk was immediately squashed because it wouldn't allow his classmate to express his emotions. Even if it allowed the emerald-eyed boy to get some sleep, it wouldn't resolve the issue. Midoriya, try explaining how you feel to me. You have friends who can help you carry the burden, the tired-looking boy said softly as he tried to make eye contact with his friend. It's all I see. I see everyone dying because I was helpless. I just can't shake the thought that All Might died because of me. I can't escape the fact that someone I viewed as a father figure is dead, Izuku sadly said as tears poured down his face. I was useless at the sports festival, and I'm still useless. If only I were strong enough, I could have helped All Might. You're strong enough. I saw how you fought off all those Nomu without assistance. There were pros who couldn't handle 5 of those monsters at once. You handled a lot more than 5, Shinso said, sounding exhausted. Friends, mentors, family are supposed to be there to help. Everyone needs help from time to time. The burden you're carrying isn't one you need to carry alone. Losing someone is hard, especially when you feel like you could have done something. At the sports festival, it was your strength alone that pushed 1A to start saving other people. All Might didn't need to save people due to your actions. All of us were present when All Might fought the man responsible for the attack on UA. We were there when the average hero wasn't. Bonds can't be replaced, but new ones can be created. Izuku stared in shock. For the first time since the attack on USJ, he expressed his fears and frustrations to someone who didn't know it already. The pent-up emotion slowly poured out of him. The sadness came out first as he started sobbing. He started shaking and having cold sweats moments later. All of this culminated in his quirk activating briefly. The green-haired boy's desk slowly started to burn. Even the low rumble of thunder could be heard. The class watched in shock as Izuku's body finally relaxed. At that moment, he relaxed enough to fall asleep. Despite being asleep, the green-haired boy was still shivering in fear and crying. Aizawa got out of his sleeping bag and went over to his student. Very carefully, he picked his green-haired student up. The black-haired man put the boy in his sleeping bag, then turned to face the rest of his students. Your mental health is important. Don't try to save everyone at once. All Might saved millions of lives because he focused on saving one life at a time, Aizawa said sadly. I would be lying if I said his death didn't hit me hard. However, you can't bottle up your emotions. Even if your friends know what you're going through, you need to let it out. Pointing to the boy sleeping in his sleeping bag, the teacher continued. Midoriya here is an example of what bottling up your fears and emotions can do to you. It eventually has to find its way out. Despite feeling physically exhausted, the black-haired man felt ready to help his students deal with their grief. The pro-hero rubbed his temples. According to the hero briefing he had received, the Safety Commission had made the hero killer Stain one of Japan's most wanted people. Aizawa let a frown form on his face as he considered what was mentioned in the hero briefing. Stain had met up with Shigaraki. His pro-hero instincts told him that nothing good would come from that meeting. All Might won't be the last hero to lose his life saving people, Aizawa said gloomily. This is a useful experience for you. There will be times when you won't be able to save a person. Handling grief is an important task for a pro-hero. Suddenly changing the subject, he said, a retired UA teacher might take over All Might's class. Principal Nezu will make the announcement when the teacher has made his decision. What extra could replace All Might? The Atomic Blonde shouted in anger at the fact that UA was trying to replace All Might. You can't just replace the world's greatest hero like that! I agree.
However, someone has to take over the course All Might taught, the principal politely said as he entered the room. I think this man will be able to meet the high bar All Might had set. It will take some more work if he's to be convinced to come out of retirement. What changed? Class 1A's teacher said in shock. When you see Night Eye at the funeral, ask him. All Might's former sidekick was the one who spoke with Principal Nezu said calmly. You will meet All Might's replacement at the funeral. What makes him suitable to be All Might's replacement? Katsuki growled. Why don't you ask All Might's former teacher? The furry principal pleasantly said as he left the room. Class 1A spent their remaining free time before the funeral talking to each other. Shinso was accepted into the class. The purple-haired boy was the center of attention as he allowed his classmates to express their grief. The day of All Might's funeral was overcast. Thunder could be heard in the distance. Only a select group of reporters was allowed to film the funeral. Only those closest to All Might were in attendance. A public burial would be held after the service. Class 1A boys were dressed in black suits, and Class 1A girls were wearing black dresses. UA provided the outfits for the students. Police officers and the pro-heroes protecting the neighborhood were dressed in black instead of their traditional uniforms. Security was on high alert. The small villain group that followed All for One was present. No one else was allowed to enter the room the villains had reserved. The funeral home was a plain-looking, dark red building. A team of pro-heroes was busy bringing hundreds of flowers into the cemetery located behind the funeral home. Sir Night Eye greeted Class 1A at the front door of the building. He waved everyone inside. Once everyone was inside, he closed the door. Instead of his usual white suit, he wore a black suit and tie. Tears rolled down his face as he looked at their teacher. Everyone else has arrived. The funeral won't start for another 10 minutes. When you're ready, go down the hallway to the right, All Might's former sidekick said sadly. Villains have the hallway to the left. Their funeral is already underway. One of them will inform us when they are leaving. Class 1A watched as the pro-hero left the room and took the hallway to the right. Most of the free space in the building was covered in flowers. 5 minutes later, Class 1A walked into the funeral for All Might. A tall man with dark green hair was sitting in the back of the room. Without looking up, he waved at Class 1A to come over. Sitting next to him was a short, white-haired man. Unlike everyone else in attendance, he wasn't wearing a black suit. Instead, he was wearing a black jumpsuit, black gloves, and black boots. As the funeral started, the man with the dark green hair walked over to the door and stood there, observing the crowd. The old, white-haired man walked over to the podium. Who are you people? The short, elderly man said with a voice filled with sorrow. I knew young Toshinori before he entered UA. I watched him grow up from a boy with a pipe dream into a man who made his dream a reality. It began to rain as the elderly man started his speech, as if nature was mourning the loss of All Might. A brief bolt of lightning flashed in the sky. Moments later, the loud rumble of thunder shook the building. The wind started to pick up, pushing the rain in a more horizontal direction as it fell towards the ground. 3 knocks that were exactly 30 seconds apart caused Night Eye to open the door. A man attired in black leather walked in. The most noticeable feature about him was the purple skin that appeared to be stapled onto him. With the constant thunder in the background, none could hear what the two were saying. As the conversation drew to a swift close, the man in black leather embraced the confused pro-hero and whispered something to him. A familiar-looking black portal started to open up behind the man. The man briefly bowed to everyone in the room before stepping into the portal. Even the elderly gentleman seemed stunned by the strange conversation. The man with the dark green hair frowned briefly as the portal closed. As it faded, the man let a sorrow-filled smile return to his face. Young Toshinori had many faults. His biggest fault and the one that made him the greatest hero was his inability to think before he acted. It was easy to get a rise out of the young man, the old man said as he started to get nostalgic. Young Toshinori's greatest trait was his ability to provide people with a sense of comfort when he was around. The one trait that I got to see that most people didn't was the man's determination. No matter how many times he failed the training I laid out before him, he always got up and tried again. Windows started to rattle as hail began to strike them, and the resulting noise drowned out what the white-haired man was saying as he was overcome with grief and began to walk to his seat. The blue-haired boy was about to ask the older man a question as the man sat down, but stopped when his teacher shook his head as a warning. Class 1A looked at the man with newfound respect. Sitting right in front of them was the man who had personally trained the symbol of peace. Sir Night-Eye was the next person to take the podium. That eulogy is a hard one to follow. It is highly unlikely that my eulogy will hold a candle to Gran Torino's moving eulogy, Night-Eye said as he started to cry. Sir Night-Eye began to relate what had transpired with the man in leather. The villains appreciated All Might's request. I'm not sure if the hug he gave me was meant to disguise what he wanted me to hear, or if the words he whispered to me were meant to disguise the purpose of the hug. The one thing I can say for sure is the kindness All Might displayed toward his rival wasn't lost on the villains who came here to mourn. Night-Eye thanked the villains for leaving without causing a scene. The man with dark green hair pushed his glasses back into their proper spot on his nose as he wiped away his tears. He went on to explain how All Might went from someone he'd admired to a mentor. As he ended his eulogy, he thanked everyone for coming. He also talked about how he found All Might's disregard for his safety to be his greatest flaw. After securing the perimeter and the building, Endeavor walked into the room. In order to keep with the somber mood, Endeavor was wearing a black suit and tie instead of his hero costume. He wasn't releasing any flames as he stood by the door. The watchful eyes of the new #1 hero were filled with grief. The reporters covering the event turned their cameras in his direction. He shook his head in disgust. He motioned the reporters to turn the camera back to the funeral. His actions stunned everyone. Endeavor looked at everyone and motioned for them to continue. The pro-hero made it clear. He was an afterthought. He wasn't close enough to All Might to be relevant during the proceedings. Endeavor stood by the door as he observed the proceedings. The older gentleman briefly nodded at the pro-hero before turning his attention back to the podium. As the funeral drew to a close, a ball of ice, the size of a baseball, crashed through the window. Wind raced into the room, bringing rain with it. A brief flash of lightning tore through the sky. Thunder shook the building. The private funeral had ended just like the life of the symbol of peace, abruptly and without warning. Endeavor stepped away from the door to make way for the pallbearers, carrying All Might's casket to the cemetery. People began to form a procession behind the casket. As Class 1A joined the procession, they overheard the pro-hero mutter a thank you to All Might for helping him on the right path. The funeral procession was as sorrow-filled as the funeral service. Before the funeral procession reached the cemetery, a man-made fire was lit on the grassy knoll to the left of the large grassy field reserved for All Might. As the blue flames weakened into orange flames, a camera crew located on the roof of a nearby building got an aerial view of the fire. The view showed that the fire had been set in a pattern. It was a message from the villains. The message was thanking All Might and Sir Night-Eye for allowing them to bury someone they cared about, and that this act of kindness was not lost on them. The firefighters who were putting out the blaze took special care to avoid destroying the message. At Endeavor's request, the message was blocked off so people couldn't trample on it. Pro-heroes worked diligently to secure the area. In an alleyway near the funeral home, they found the body of a pro-hero who had been on guard duty. Based on the type of injuries to the body, the death had been caused by a person with a paralysis quirk. A note left at the scene of the crime stated that this man was not a true hero, and the cancer that is false heroes should be stamped out. Endeavor was the only one to speak at All Might's burial. The pro-hero personally thanked All Might for his dedication in protecting countless lives. He went on to thank All Might for showing him what it meant to be a true hero during the UA Sports Festival attack. Hours later, Endeavor was interviewed by reporters. Endeavor expressed his displeasure with the fact that the Safety Commission was trying to push adults' responsibilities onto the children. Sensing the community's low morale, the flaming hero shocked everyone with the second part of his response. He was recommending that hero agencies start teaming up with each other. Heroes have to make sure that society is protected. The lesson that Endeavor learned from All Might was that one hero cannot be the symbol of peace. True heroes are those who prioritize the lives of the civilians they try to protect. Endeavor finished his interview by saying that All Might laid the groundwork for a safer world. And as the next #1 hero of Japan, the flaming hero intended to see his predecessor's dream become a reality. Endeavor's approval rating improved as he started creating programs aimed at helping heroes improve. He was frequently seen going to seminars and courses on communication.
The pro hero announced that he would be teaming up with other agencies on a monthly basis to help train them. Crime remained unusually low, with the new #1 hero prioritizing the well-being of the citizens. Even the students at UA noticed the impact. Every Sunday, a group of dedicated citizens demonstrated in front of UA. Some of the signs they carried thanked the school for trying to teach students properly, while others encouraged UA to try its best. Class 1A felt a level of motivation they hadn't felt before. They intended to make sure that as a class, they became the next symbol of peace. The Monday following All Might's funeral was chaotic for Class 1A. Instead of having homeroom first, they had their hero course first. In their excitement, Class 1A arrived in their homeroom an hour before school was supposed to start. Class 1A stared in shock as their homeroom teacher entered the classroom 30 minutes later. Their teacher appeared to have gotten a good night's sleep. Walking next to their homeroom teacher was a short, elderly man wearing a yellow jumpsuit with yellow gloves and boots. The man was also wearing a mask to cover his eyes. In his left hand, he clutched a cane. "Today I will be introducing the teacher who will be taking over your hero training," the erasure hero said with enthusiasm, shocking Class 1A. "Two of you trained with him a few times. This was back before you entered UA." A light bulb went off as the green-haired boy figured out who the man was. During the funeral, his grief had blinded him to the identity of the elderly gentleman. It was the only person who was able to scare the first symbol of peace. You're the one that scared All Might," Izuku said in shock as he tried to remember the old man's name. Was your name Gran Torino?" "All Might helped us grow strong enough to handle your training, you old geezer," Katsuki growled with far more confidence than he felt. "Who are you two again?" Gran Torino said as he pretended to be senile. Thank you for watching the video to the end. Now, there are a few more things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. On behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank the writer of this video and editors for this video. Their details will be in the description. If you're a voice actor, editor, or writer, or you're interested in becoming one of those, go to the Discord that is in the description of this video and hit up the head of one of those areas. We're always looking for members to join us. That's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you're interested, and hit that like button if you liked the video. Until next time, peace out, mortals. Have a fantastic day.